humor is really underutilized, especially in digital advertising. And I think that speaks back to that virality, right? Your shareability, your talk factor, much more likely to be shared and talked about if the ad is humorous and engaging. And then on the flip side, ads that are associated with negative feelings like disappointment and annoyance tend to underperform.
Hello, and welcome to The Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Angela Voss, our CEO, and Rob DeMars, our Chief Product Architect.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. We are back with our thoughts on some recent marketing news, always trying to root our opinions in data, research, and what drives business results. Our topic for today was decided by a LinkedIn poll I posted recently to get some help picking a trend to cover. And the winner was the use of emotion in advertising. So today we're going to talk about why emotion in advertising is important, what kind of emotions drive effectiveness, how might this differ by industry or category, and what marketing channels are best at creating emotion. So there's a lot to cover here, both from a marketing research perspective and from our own experience with clients. So let's jump into it. This topic is really evergreen, but it came up recently in the marketing news when System1 and Pinterest published some research on digital advertising effectiveness. As a quick reminder, System1 is a marketing research company, and they're known for their star rating system. What they do is they assign a 1 to 5.9 star rating based on the emotional response viewers have to an ad. And this demonstrates an ad's ability to drive long-term growth, and we're going to get into the data that supports that statement shortly. But before we do, let's talk about the study. System1 found that the digital ads with the greater star ratings did a few things right, and emotion was really at the heart of these best practices. So, for example, higher performing ads appealed to the right creative brain. Specifically, assets that were more right-brained resulted in a 90% average increase in brand favorability. This is because the right hemisphere of our brain has a broader sense of attention than the left. So if you use elements the right brain likes, like a clear sense of place, characters, or distinctive assets, you're going to support that long-term brand building. Also, the most effective digital ads used things like cultural moments. These could be holidays or large sporting events. These moments also tap into our emotions by making us feel like we're in a shared experience with other people. And, of course, storytelling also drove effectiveness, which we all know appeals to our emotions. And this study is just one example of some recent support for the use of emotion in advertising. Just earlier this year, Kantar and Affectiva published research supporting the same finding for digital ads. They found the stronger emotion an ad evokes, the more it drives long-term brand equity, generates impact, and the more likely it is to go viral. And the IPA also has some interesting data on emotion in advertising. They found 43% of emotional ad campaigns reported very large business effects, which include sales, market share, price sensitivity, loyalty, and new customers, all after 3 or more years. And only 23% of rational campaigns had the same effects. And if you're thinking that this only applies to B2C brands, you would be incorrect. The B2B Institute has really led the way for emotional advertising research in B2B. And out of all their research, the part of the research that I think is the most interesting comes from this report called Cashing In on Creativity. In the report, they demonstrate how emotional ads deliver more revenue, profit, and market share growth than rational ads. The Institute said creativity and emotion do 3 key things to drive higher effectiveness. First, they cut through and get attention. Second, they form stronger associations between a brand and a buying situation. And third, they make a brand more likely to be retrieved from buyer memory during a buying situation. And that's really just scratching the surface of the piles of marketing research supporting the use of emotion in driving marketing effectiveness. But one thing I always wondered when I heard this type of research was, okay, we all know that emotion is important, that's been proven, but not just any emotion, right? Certain emotions have to be driving a better response than others. So, Ange, you dug into this for us, so I'm going to pass it over to you. What have you found in terms of which emotions drive marketing effectiveness?
Yeah, I think when you consider memorability, right? And those emotions that are able to drive superior brand equity. It, according to the research, you're thinking of positive emotions. So joy, pride, contentment, attraction would all drive that superior brand equity. And then interestingly, humor, which we all love, I think. We love humorous, entertaining ads. It's a powerful tool to evoke that happiness and amusement, is especially impactful. But as the report had shared, I'm sure you saw, Elena, humor is really underutilized, especially in digital advertising. And I think that speaks back to that virality, right? Your shareability, your talk factor, much more likely to be shared and talked about if the ad is humorous and engaging. And then on the flip side, ads that are associated with negative feelings like disappointment and annoyance tend to underperform. So they're vital in advertising to drive that effectiveness, but the key really lies in strategically like harnessing that right one for that lasting effectiveness.
Right, right. And I also want to add, just as an important disclaimer related to harnessing the right emotion, you also want to make sure that once you have that right emotion, your ads also have motivation, right? You need to deliver the right motivational message in an emotionally engaging way. That way, you can inspire a customer to take action and also remember your brand. You also mentioned humor. And Rob, you're the closest thing we have to a comedian at our agency. So you,
Well,
He likes to think he is anyway.
I probably shouldn't give him that fodder.
I like to tell my teenagers that I have a master's degree in the comedic arts, and they would beg to differ.
Well, teenagers say the darndest things. But Rob, when we think about driving emotion in advertising, I do think a lot of us go right to humor, probably because it's delightful. And we could probably dedicate almost an entire episode to just the impact of humor, the history of humor in advertising, and particularly how to get it right. But could you tell us what you think marketers should keep in mind when they're using humor in their advertisements?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, humor is a secret weapon. Not everyone wants to cry, but everybody wants to laugh, right? Who doesn't love to chuckle? Obviously, like Ange mentioned, it increases the talk value of a brand. It elicits that positive brand association. But I think humor is particularly effective and used quite often in categories where there's a lot of parity, right? There's a lot of similar features and benefits, and you're really struggling to differentiate yourself. And that's where you look at auto insurance, right? All the great work that's done in that space that leverages humor, whether it's from Geico and Progressive. And then look at light beer. I mean, that's just a category that has so commonly looked to humor to help differentiate itself. And it tends to, frequent the award shows as a result. I think humor is very subjective. So I'm going to say something highly controversial here, but I do not think The Princess Bride is a funny movie.
Inconceivable.
I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for that, but I'm sorry. I just don't find that movie funny. But obviously, most of the world does. So that's just something you have to keep in mind when developing campaigns leveraging humor. All you need to do is look at the American award shows and compare it to the British award shows for advertising to get a real sense of just how different humor is perceived by different audiences.
Well, and I had read too that a lot of brands are turning to comedians to figure out what type of humor they should be introducing for their brand, because whether you like the comedian or not, they're constantly testing, right? They're testing audience over and over and over in small venues, large venues, and learning. And to that point, everyone likes something a little bit different. So you have to find the norm and something that works with your brand.
Well, I think you nailed it, Ange. I mean, you look at the amount of what you would consider pretesting that comedians do. These huge stadium comedians still go to the 20-person bar and run their jokes by an audience to see what lands and what doesn't land. And I think that advertisers really need to borrow a page from the comedians and really embrace pretesting. I know there's a lot of aversion to pretesting, especially as it relates to, it's just not going to, it's going to be a bummer on our creative angle. But you look at it and you go, putting stuff in front of audiences before you put it in the biggest stage in advertising is probably not a bad idea, just to make sure that your humor is landing and not offending.
Right. Being willing to pretest. It's almost like comedians being willing to go bomb, right? They always talk about sometimes a joke has to bomb in front of an audience to get to that set that you eventually, take to Netflix. And
I mean, I bomb all the time in front of my teenagers, but at some point in time, they're going to laugh, and I'm going to savor that moment.
yeah, we hope so. So, Rob, one thing you got into a little bit there when you talked about humor is just what categories suit humor well. And that leads me into this next topic that I wanted to cover, which is how might different emotions vary by category or industry. So, you're a TV creative expert and you've pre-tested and produced thousands of concepts and advertisements. So, you have a unique view on what emotions work for different categories. So, can you walk us through? How have you seen different types of emotions be more or less effective for different industries?
Let's just talk about cola a bit further. When you look at that category, it's a category that's just so rich with lifestyle and celebrities and humor. And, sometimes even the best of them can get it wrong, right? We all remember Pepsi back in 2017. For those of you who need their memory jogged because you intentionally tried to forget it, which would be completely understandable, our friend Kendall Jenner did a spot where she was doing a photo shoot, and all of a sudden this protest appeared in front of her. They were on their way to do a rally, and what did she do? She left her, $1 million photo shoot to go walk with all the other protesters, and ended up at the front lines with a police officer standing right in front of her, and she handed him a Pepsi, right? Because, world peace through the power of Pepsi, was, I guess, the message. And Pepsi had to pull the ad because it obviously fell really flat. And that would be an example of using perhaps the wrong emotion for that particular product. Had that been a campaign for Greenpeace or some other, organization, that might have hit well, but not for Pepsi. All that being said, I do think it's a good idea to challenge the norms in your particular category. One example that we saw recently, we have a long history in life insurance and testing a lot of different types of creative approaches in life insurance. And it's a category that's really rich with serious emotional ads because it's a serious topic. But we tested our way into a really lighthearted approach that actually, gives the consumer a bit of a chuckle, and it pulled well beyond the control did in market. But we wouldn't have just aired that. We would have wanted to pre-test it ahead of time, which is what we did, because obviously in life insurance, you could potentially offend people. So that kind of goes back to the pre-testing. It's good to stretch the boundaries of a category, but I bet if Pepsi would have pre-tested Kendall Jenner handing a police officer a Pepsi, they probably would have seen the audience's reaction without having to get, egg on their face.
Rob, pre-testing is such a good point and something that's probably underutilized by a lot of brands. And I know that some brands, they must want to try to have emotional ads and they're reading this research and they're bought into it, but there's always that fear of putting something out there and having it bomb. So it seems like pre-testing could be a good way to inspire some confidence and try new things without risking your brand reputation.
And it can allow you to go really bold, like really push the envelope. You want to differentiate yourself, so you just don't want to differentiate yourself in the wrong way.
Right. Rob, this is kind of a random question, but you mentioned celebrity, and I think of celebrity being really tied into emotion. And I'm curious, have you found that celebrity is effective for TV advertising, or that it can help create more emotion, or what have you found as far as celebrity goes?
I think celebrity becomes a situation of borrowed interest, right? And if you're borrowing the right kind of interest, it's amazing. But if it's a celebrity for the sake of celebrity, I think that's where you can really hurt yourself. It's a very expensive card to play. So you want to make sure that that celebrity really represents the brand, really elicits that, emotion you're looking for. It's not a 2-inch putt to say, okay, we're just going to put somebody in with a high Q score and it's going to make the campaign work.
Yeah, I think we've had brands that we've felt like it's really helped performance, and then other brands where they've made a significant financial investment tying a celebrity to their brand and it didn't really pay out. And whether or not that's tied to the right emotion, I don't really know for sure, but there's a lot of risk, I think, with celebrity. I think we would probably recommend leaning more towards character than celebrity specifically. Can you make your character a celebrity? You can control your character a lot more easily than you can control your celebrity. But it does kind of bring that story element into it.
It's hard for a character to get you canceled, but it has happened to people.
Yeah,
so.
right. Can
That's
happen.
not a completely free move either. TV is the most powerful marketing channel. It's first in effectiveness, leads for trust, and is number one in driving emotion. But it's also expensive, difficult to scale, and hard to measure. So we flipped the traditional agency model on its head and created all-inclusive TV. You get one bill for media. We cover everything else you need to succeed. So say goodbye to hourly agency fees and say hello to making TV work harder than ever. Visit marketingarchitects.com to learn more. So we've covered why emotions are important, what types of emotions drive effectiveness, and just went through how that might change by industry. So the final piece of this puzzle in my mind is channel. If emotion drives better results, we want to make sure that we place that emotional creative in channels, in spots that are going to drive the biggest impact, right? So what do we know as far as which marketing channels are going to drive emotion the best?
Yeah, certainly important when you're considering, right, the reach and the impact of this emotionally driven campaign that you've spent so much time investing into. And we have seen, and obviously we see it with a lot of brands, TV is generally the leading medium for something like this. It has an ability to narrate a story really well. You've got those visual and auditory elements that makes it a powerful tool. In fact, in a lot of cases, you see brands when they're initially rolling out a very story-focused execution, they'll take on long format. Sometimes you'll see 2-minute spots roll out, and those get kind of cut up and disseminated across marketing channels. But I don't think that, kind of going back to the research, I don't think that digital should be overlooked, right? TV should set the stage for building this emotional connection. And then you've got other channels. Digital should be one that you should really use to amplify and extend those connections, which will help make it more interactive, could potentially help make it more personalized. When we see solid, emotionally driven TV creative paired with digital content that it engages and evokes emotion, that's when we would really expect to see the most impactful performance. You know, there's a lot of synergy between those two channels, so they work really well together.
Yeah, it does seem like, Ange, there's more and more research around digital driving emotion, and we always think to TV and video first, especially as a TV agency, but more and more, I think that more is going to start to come out around how effective digital can be too, and driving emotion and building those memories.
Do you guys have a favorite emotional ad that comes to mind? What about you, Snoop Rob?
Oh, I definitely do. I'm going to go with a classic. Elena, I don't think you were born yet, but you probably saw this ad in history class. Back in 1997, Apple released an ad called Here's to the Crazy Ones. Real
Yes.
classic. The vignettes of Bob Dylan, Richard Branson, John Lennon, and Einstein, and so on and so forth. And beautifully written copy talking about Here's to the Crazy Ones, narrated by none other than Richard Dreyfuss. And they never even showed a computer in that spot, yet it pulled on the creative community. And at the time, especially in 97, Steve Jobs kind of coming back in the rain and really making that call out to the creative community that Apple's a brand that's just like you and can really identify with you. So I love that one.
You know, you jogged a thought for me, though. Apple is such a recognizable brand. One thing that I think is really important to, as you're a brand going, okay, we're going to storytell, we're going to get more emotional in our advertising, is continuing to remember to brand early, brand often. I think we've all seen creative, right, where it tells an amazing story, and right at the very end, you're like, oh, that was that brand. And that's easier to forget. I know I've done that too, going, I love this ad, but I can't remember who it's for. There's so many insurance players, and you're like, was it Progressive? Was it State Farm? Yeah. So continuing to make sure you're upping that branding element as well.
You know what's amazing about that particular ad? Because it does violate that rule. It definitely is borrowing all that equity, and then at the end, it leaves you with a tagline. Now, do you guys remember the tagline?
Oh, Rob.
Think different?
Yes, right? Now here's the thing that's great about this, okay? So they released this ad 1997, they use that tagline, right? And it has not been their tagline for 20 years. But everyone still thinks of Think Different. So that's the power.
Well, Rob, I'm glad I knew that answer because that ad that's actually on my wall, our audio listeners can't see this, but the copy for that advertisement, I'm obsessed with it. And it's on the wall of my office.
What's your favorite emotional ad?
My favorite it's called Loretta by Google, and it played during the Super Bowl in 2020. And Rob, I know you said that not everybody always wants to cry, but I love crying. I love a good cry. I do it often, and that ad, I will cry every single time I watch it. It's for their Google Home product, and it tells a story of a man whose wife is losing her memory, and he's asking Google to remember all these different memories of them together. I can't talk about it for too long because I don't want to cry on the podcast, but it is really, really sweet and definitely taps into an emotion where I remembered it. And they did a very good job as well, branding early and often, like Angela was talking about. And I should add that that's also something that System 1 and Pinterest found in their study that really matters for digital ads as well. Even when they're shorter, you still need to brand right at the beginning. And for Google, it's very easy because they start off by saying, hey, Google, remember XYZ. But I think that ad did a nice job of making sure we all not only were moved by it, but also associated it with Google.
I love that one too because it's Google. It's not that Google's a cold brand, but it's very functional in our lives. So that element of surprise and bringing you to tears in front of your TV set is kind of cool. Yeah. The one that I love is the Volkswagen ad where the little boy is pretending to be Darth Vader and he thinks he has superpowers and can control the universe thanks to his dad and his key fob. So I love that one.
That one's awesome.
Well, if I can go ahead and summarize here for us, we've covered a lot today, but we'd say that emotional ads, it's proven that they're more effective, but you definitely need both emotion and motivation, not just emotion alone. Emotions like surprise and happiness are definitely more effective than anger and fear. And if you're going to use humor, make sure you do it right because it is personal to every one of us. Emotion's also going to vary by industry. There are certain categories that have leaned into certain types of emotion more than others, but also don't be afraid to challenge norms and try something new. But that's where you could really use pretesting. We think it's pretty under-leveraged for tests like this, and it could be one way to test out something that your brand hasn't done before you're putting it in market and risking it not resonating and damaging your brand. And as far as channel mix for emotion, obviously channels like video are going to deliver your emotional message more effectively than any other. However, there's more research than ever before showing that you can drive emotion through channels like digital as well. That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you find our show valuable, please leave us a rating and review. And if you want to know what the research says about some recent news, you can contact us at marketingarchitects.com/podcast. Now go forth and build great marketing.
I'm feeling a little emotional after this one. Might go have myself a little cry.
I'm always
doesn't surprise me,
emotional.
Rob.
I truly do love crying too. I wasn't kidding about that.